Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to look at hurricanes. And hurricanes are exciting and scary and has a lot to do with severe thunderstorms that we've already talked about. We're going to see what causes them. We're going to see what perpetuates them, when you would expect them, where you would expect them, and some of the damage that it can do and why. So let's look at some examples here. During the summer, the sun is the northern hemisphere summer. The sun is not at the equator. It's actually at the tropic line above the equator, so it's towards the North Atlantic. It's in the southern North Atlantic Ocean, directly onto that water. And it starts heating up, and it heats about the bath water temperature. So there's tremendous amount of energy stored in that ocean water. And that ocean water has enough heat in it, energy in it, to spawn tropical cyclones. And tropical cyclones eventually can become hurricanes. And so these hurricanes do quite a lot of damage on the southern east coast of the U.S. and throughout the Caribbean and over into the northern part of South America. You can also have cyclones in the Pacific Ocean, and they're called different things in different oceans, but they're based upon the energy that's in the water, and the amount of heat energy that can then affect the weather above the ocean there. So we're going to see that the South Atlantic Ocean, really there's not enough energy that way, but in the northern Atlantic Ocean, especially in the southern part of the northern Atlantic Ocean, near the tropic lines, there is lots of hurricanes during the summer. So August, September, even into October, that is hurricane season. So hurricanes form, the generic word for a hurricane is the cyclone. And a cyclone is essentially sucking up the energy out of the warm ocean water. And so if you have lots of hot water and you have some kind of way to keep that warm air that has lots of moisture in it and turn it up into some cold air. So you have to have cold air high, you have to have warm, moist air low, and you have to have a way to get that warm air up into the cold air. In that case, you can have a huge storm, and that huge thunderstorm essentially over this ocean continues to feed on the energy from the water and it's almost like an engine that keeps it going. Okay, so the water evaporates. That water has tons of energy in it. Now the air has lots of water in it, and if you have cold air high, and warm, moist air coming up into it, you've got clouds. And then what eventually happens is you have a low pressure center, and the air starts to turn in a cyclone. Okay, so it'll turn counterclockwise because it's low pressure in the inside, and as it does, you're going to get more and more speed, and you're going to get more and more clouds. As a certain temperature or a certain speed, a certain airspeed, what will happen is that the inside will open up and you'll get an eye. It's called an eye with a very low pressure on the inside and very high speed winds circulating around that eye. So of course it doesn't start as a Category 5 hurricane. It starts as something called a tropical disturbance. So a tropical disturbance essentially is an instability in the air, so that you've got cold air and warm air with water in it, and eventually you're going to have a low pressure center. And then as soon as you have a low pressure center, you're going to end up with a tropical depression. So the tropical disturbance is where the water is raising up into the air and it's got moisture in it. And then as it starts to spin with a low pressure, that's called a tropical depression. Once you start getting higher and higher speeds, you simply have gradings of the storm. So the storm can be weak or strong, depending upon the speeds of the winds, caused by that energy that's inside that warm water. So 62 kilometers per hour, it's now a tropical storm. All right. You get to 119 kilometers, which I think is like 70, 3 or 4 miles an hour. It's now called a cyclone. All right. Once it's a cyclone, we would even call it a hurricane. So a cyclone and a hurricane basically synonymous. So once the winds reach that, okay, what'll happen is that the low pressure will open up on the inside, and the clouds will be in a circle, kind of a column around it. So you have an inside low pressure where there's really no storm at all. It's a blue sky. If you're inside the eye of the storm, there's no winds. It's a blue sky. It's no big deal. And then the other side of the hurricane hits you, and it's awful. Okay, so you can have an eye, depending on how big the hurricane is. The eye can be even big. You can have 25, 50 miles, which means you could be in the eye of a hurricane for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, depending on how slow that the hurricane is going, to where it doesn't feel like there's any weather at all until the other side of that storm hits you. So it's almost like two sides of a thunderstorm. So the fastest winds is towards the inside. The inside is spinning, and that is the eye wall. And it's strong, dense clouds and very, very high winds. So as long as it's got energy, it sustains itself. And so as soon as a hurricane moves over land, there's no more warm water to suck in, it starts tapering down. Or if it goes into cold water, so if a hurricane would say blow north and blow off into cold Atlantic water or Pacific water, it tuckers out because the energy is the warm water that's in after a long summer of high sun. Okay. Now they're going to move very, very fast inside in a circle, but the whole storm doesn't have to move very fast. It can move very, very slow, and then the wind currents and the high and low pressure inside the weather that it's coming into. So, for instance, let's say a hurricane is coming west over the Atlantic Ocean. It will steer left or right depending upon what the high pressure and the low pressure is over the United States or over the Caribbean. So the weather patterns in the area that it's moving into affect whether it moves up or down. Now, there is a hurricane classification system called the Saffir System, Saffir-Simpson system. Let's say that five times fast. It's essentially how much damage is being done based upon the winds. And the wind is not everything a hurricane causes. Wind is dramatic because it blows the trees down and blows the shingles off the roof and all kinds of stuff like that. But the winds also are churning up the sea, and the sea can come in on the shore, and it's that storm surge that's very, very damaging for a hurricane. Okay, so lots and lots of flooding possibility, damage to houses, homes, whatever. Okay. So the insurance for these beach properties in North Carolina and Florida are very, very high because the likelihood that every few years you're going to have a serious hurricane that could do damage to that structure is high. And so I'm sure that they would pay dear premiums to have, say, a hotel on the beach. But if it's worth it, it's worth to pay the insurance. So a lot of the hurricane's drama is, of course, the winds, but a lot of the damage is caused by the water that's rushing in from the ocean. So whenever there's a low pressure on the ocean, the water kind of sucks out of the bay. Sometimes you can completely empty a bay on side a coast where you can just see nothing but the bottom of the ocean, and then all of a sudden it comes right back in. So it's serious and scary. There is a National Hurricane Center in most countries, and especially the United States has a large one where top-rate weather people are continuously monitoring things, giving ideas of when something is. Then eventually they could contact the governments, and the governments could order evacuations and whatever. So, as a person who lives in an area that's prone to hurricanes, by their experience knows whether something, a weak hurricane or a strong hurricane, is likely to be catastrophic to them. They may choose to sit at their property, because this is also a time that if everyone is leaving an area, that's a time that vandals could come in or looters could come in, and so some people choose to stay in their property, and people do die during storms because they stayed in a place that is not safe.